Okay, so pause there and just feed her a couple times. So this dog is showing a little bit of anxiety coming into the room. So just stand there and feed the dog a couple times. So we see a little bit of tail puffing up, right, at the base of the tail. Dog definitely walk past watching what's behind the dog. So this dog's a little bit uncomfortable. So I just take that information in. Lots of dogs are in a new environment like this. It's not at all uncommon, right? But that tells me to be careful about what I work on in a given session. So now there, yes, good. And then what are you using as your marker? Okay, all right, so. Yeah, that's right, just move this way. Just walk backwards and just kind of move away from it. So what happens a lot when dogs are a little bothered by things is that it's hard for them not to keep an eye on it, right? So we like frequently when a dog's nervous about something to turn them away from it and reward them so they can kind of forget about it. But that's harder for some dogs, right? If you're a little anxious about something, you want to keep one eye on it. So sometimes I'm best kind of working where they can see what it is behind me, you with your back to that, and then mark and reward here. So just go ahead and say her name here, make a little noise. Yeah. And watch out if you're doing your okay at the same time. So you want the dog to look at you, say okay, and then go to reward. There you go, nice. Good. There we go. Excellent. Now multiples too. So don't always think one, right? Sometimes you can do multiples in a row. Excellent. Feed, walk back, feed, feed, then pause. Now let the dog refine. There. Nice. So there the dog looked at what was making it nervous for a second, but decided I'm okay now, and I can refocus. That tells you the dog's getting comfortable. Before the dog said, nah, I don't want to turn my back on that thing. That may come up behind me, right? Now the dog's getting down near the end, glanced, and then put its energy back to her. Just telling her, I'm getting okay now. Nice, good. And are you using kibble? Yeah, so the dog's got really good food motivation, right? You can see a lot of energy in how the dog's taking the food, and it's kibble, right? And so because the dog's a little anxious, I might use kibble in regular training where the dog's comfortable and use something higher value in a new environment where the dog might notice stuff. Because we're not then just working on obedience or engagement, we're working on counter-conditioning anxiety as well, right? And so I want the rewards to strongly override the dog's anxiety. And so dogs that are anxious, I need more motivation for them to work through their anxiety, right? And so we know as dog trainers, like one of the worst things we can have, the dog trainer's Achilles heel, is a very nervous, low motivation dog. It's a nightmare. It's the worst, right? And so if my dog is nervous but has motivation, then I'm going to use that motivation to condition away their anxiety, right? We're using basically counter conditioning is simply classical conditioning, but instead of a neutral stimulus followed by a reward, it's a fear-inducing stimulus followed by a reward, right? So a dog's a little anxious about the camera or Ed with his hat or whatever it is. The dog's noticing over there. The dog sees it, gets a big reward. Sees it, gets a big reward. Pretty soon the dog's like, that's not scary. That means good things, right? And if the drive is high enough, the dog works through that. Very nice. Good. Careful a little, too, about shoving back at the dog. We'll talk about food delivery mechanics when we talk about motivation tomorrow. But there's this idea that you don't want to reward the dog when in that state of mind, right? You're going to reinforce that behavior. But pretty typically, unless the dog was growling at it and you went like, yes, right there, and fed them while they're growling at it, they check out, they go, you make a little noise, they redirect to you, they focus here, you say yes. That's separated from the act of doing it, and the last thing they did before the reward was turn away from that and focus on me. And so it's very difficult to actually reinforce the bad behavior if you get the dog to turn away from whatever it is before you mark and reward. So with dogs that have issues, like leash reactivity, obviously, if my dog lunged at something, I wouldn't want to, right as they lunged and barked, say yes, and then so they turn around and take a reward, because then I'm telling them, yeah, that's the right behavior, right? But if they lunge and I go, hey, and they turn back towards me and they refocus, yes, there, that's what I'm reinforcing. I'm reinforcing the act of turning away from that thing, right? And so when we get into applying rewards to dogs that have varying degrees of anxiety, it's twofold. She's now working on holding the dog's attention engagement, teaching the dog behavior, but we're also addressing the underlying state of mind. And if the dog's fearful enough, that's all we're working on, right? A dog that's anxious enough can't process information. You can't take it in. You can't think. You can't concentrate. Like, you're deathly afraid of spiders. I'm like, I'm going to teach you calculus. Here, the spider, a tarantula in a jar. I'm going to set this right on your shoulder here. Ignore this, please, and pay attention to me. Now, factoring polynomials. You ready? You're like, no, I'm not ready. I can't think. I can't breathe. I can't do anything, right? So anxiety will actually block the ability. And high enough levels of anxiety actually inhibit memory creation. Right? So there's chemicals released, cortisol and stress hormones that are released, and they actually block messaging between nerve cells, which is where memories are created. That's why people that have really traumatic experiences, people that are police and military, that are in firefights and things, you don't remember things. You forget them because your body was under so much stress, psychological stress, that it actually blocks your ability to create memories. So there's a certain level of anxiety that is incompatible with taking in information, especially refined information, right? And so that's your first thing. If the dog shows anxiety, and this dog's anxiety wasn't overpowering, the dog was noticing stuff, that'll get much better if she works it properly. And that dog will learn to tune out the environment as sort of a security blanket. How old was that dog, Cindy? 18 months. So the dog may never be like a social butterfly, may never be totally comfortable with things, but she might too, she might change, but we may make that dog so the dog has very strong coping mechanisms, one of which is I focus on you and I tune the rest of the world out. We do this all the time. Like, what's a more productive behavior? Like barking at the thing that makes you nervous, or ignoring it and staring at me? I'll take the latter, right? And so there are dogs that at a certain point we never completely eliminate their anxiety, but we make them super functional. They've learned if I pretend things aren't there and I put on my blinders, I'm functional. But if you force them to try to interact, like, hey, let the stranger pet your dog a bunch of times, it'll get better, right? No, not necessarily, right? You can make it much, much worse. So you have to be careful about trying to force those dogs to interact in certain ways.